So the history of opium is a pretty extreme kind of. It's very pervasive throughout. As I said yesterday, it was the screen that the Neanderthal used. They would have their libations, and if they liked you, and because you enjoyed their libations in a similar way to them, then they would intermingle with you, and they would generate Homo sapiens. If they didn't like you, they would reject you. Nobody would have any sympathy for you. There was no thinking about your positive qualities for a very long time. It was they either accepted you or they rejected you. Later, as Homo sapiens emerged, conditional rejection began to emerge. Probably due to the fact that everybody whose opioid receptors were the same as the Neanderthals, they did not return to Africa to breed with the larger population of hominins. They stayed in the Mediterranean region. And gradually, the influx of new people was of a different nature. Now, the flow was never just one way, and the traits apparently seem to be recessive genes. There have been new mutations and various things. But in our time, when as communication and travel and communication between the languages and historical documentation and historical collation improved, people came to understand the place of opium in the human condition. And they realized that there were always those that could be managed in a very predictable way with opium, especially if somebody else managed their dose and access, especially if they didn't know there was opium in anything. If it was in the incense that they swang in church on Sunday, and how often do you go to Mass, and how strong is the opium in the Mass, and you start to feel disoriented and a little bit upset, and your behavior becomes unstable when you don't go to Mass all the time. Or there's people that, even in that setting, don't have the same behavior, so those are the bad people. So the good people, their opium absorption is standard. The bad people, they have abnormal opium absorption. Now the bad people, originally, so they weren't using opium, but in our time, it's the bad people who are using opium. So, we talked about the witches and their potions and their brews and their spells. Their spells are different from the prayers of church. Because a lot of people realized, because they were always experimenting with the lowest dose, how far can they extend this control over people? How small of a dose can I give somebody that if I pull it back, they come kissing my butt? Because, I'm getting messages that, if I don't get opium from, if I don't conform with Black society, I have to go to the Skinhead Society. Well, let me talk to you about the skinheads. And then they were out there saying, see, I think you've been black, and once you go black, you never go back. Okay, look, I was saying Sun Ra was my uncle, but I'm saying the reincarnation of Rommel is my son, and I'm named Holly because he's the king. He did not spend the quantity time in Tenere like my husband and myself spent. But we brought as much of Tenere to him as was useful to him, and he knows how to delegate things. So he has never been someone who's had a successful conversation with a black man, I'm sure. Successful, both parties split and are seen again. But he kind of has a reputation. Um, but no, I mean, there's, I don't know. Have you ever met face to face with Abdul Wahid? But what he did do was he set up a rumor campaign in which people started talking about his mother, who was living like um, originally across the street from me and then just a block away from me. And I went over there to talk to her because somebody, because she was always smiling and happy and saying stuff, and then she had strokes after COVID and never made sense again after that. We would talk in tones back and forth with each other. And anyway, so there's always these things like that people have their what is hardened in people, what is softened in people. The Omanis are really interesting people that they once controlled Zanzibar. So they're very involved in is it Tanzania now? Because it used to be Tanganyika. No, it's Tanganyika and Zanzibar, so it's Tanzania. And so when you see the conversations that people have in Doha, that they are talking to the Iranians, they were talking to the Iranians. They weren't doing anything like that anymore. They were talking to the Palestinians. They were talking to the Syrians. But they were never really talking to Boko Haram. They were never talking to Kony. And a lot of that had to do with people. My son, he's been living around here. I mean, I don't know when Stewie showed up, but he was born in 1974. And one of the ways that people can convince people that they're really stupid is to be very tall. Now, he got growth hormones to go to adult height at an earlier age. And that comes with prions and senility and all that. But my husband wanted to work with both of us in the adult mind, because everybody's mind eventually will shrink with age. Now, if you do that transition properly, you can live indefinitely. But most people don't. So he gives us that transition early in life. If you're going to live 10,000 years, if you're going to live 100,000 years, what's 50 years early on senility? I mean, that's going to be your mind. So if you get that mind at a time when you have the support system around you, they want to be supportive, they want to cook your supper for you, it's not a stigma to have somebody help you with things, that you learn to be self-sufficient again. But if you're fighting with a lot of pride, a lot of resentment and stuff like that, your brain is taken up with all of these poisonous emotions, and you come out of it a zombie. And they have to put you down in a deep cave and forget you exist. So when your brain shrinks, you don't have the receptors to have, and you notice the Tuareg are all tall. When your brain shrinks, they all seem kind of dumb, and they're all tall. And they've got like this dumb wisdom about them. They've broken it down to what's simple, what holds, what we call the channels and chakras. They might break down a different way. But if it doesn't relate to the houses and families and the terrains and the different, then it's something that is unstable. It's something that has less meaning. And if you spend a lot of time in the things that have less meaning, you're building a castle on sand, you're flying around on a flying carpet. But if you're walking on the ground at the regular pace, everything you encounter has meaning in some way. Whereas if you're traveling around rapidly, you could very quickly end up someplace where you're completely confused. So, but there are different ways to end up with a shrunken brain, and different injuries and what they entail. But again, people with brain damage are known to be less receptive to opiates. That the pain that they get from neuralgia or something, the seizures and stuff like that, the opiates don't work with them. But what does work is fats and anti-inflammatories. So you have people with very complex medical cultures, and you have people with very simple medical cultures. You know, what is the purpose of medical treatment? It doesn't hurt anymore. Whereas others is, what is the purpose of medical treatment? Restore function, go on with life, figure out what your new normal is. And we say, well, this is our new normal. We just need this plant. But, you know, what about the next time? What happens if you get brain damage? Well, those people are unlucky. We don't know them anymore. And so if you've learned to deal with those, I'm really wondering about this. Yeah. And if you learn to deal with people who they have discarded, you know, sometimes you generate a population that then seems threatening to them, and then they start to target you on things. They start to make more sacrifices, because also if you specialize your brain, chances are you've done so by making a very, very small blood vessel bridge to a very demanding part of your brain. And you sever that connection, it is very hard for anything that you've structured over there to get back on the little capillaries. I mean, this is a process. I might be using the wrong, it might be just the neurons, like a one neuron connector, and then this big glob of development, and then, especially if you only do things a very precise way. So if you're accessing this part of your brain through a variety of different vocabularies, a variety of different languages even, you know, we who study Dzogchen in English are also looking at Tibetan, Chinese, Sanskrit, Japanese, Pali. And if you're studying Nyingma, which is where we study both Buddhism and Bon interchangeably and intermingled, then if somebody hit me on this part of the brain or this part of the brain, I probably wouldn't be, I would have the standard brain damage reaction, a variety of different things, but my other functions would more quickly recover. And I would gradually, and I've been through brain damage so many times that I know that even the motor skills and things like that, they rise and fall, and they can be restored. So there's lots of different ways to work around it. So anyway, so we're going to be changing things up. We're going to be moving things back gradually to you get your dope from your employer. Because that's what one of the things I say is we aren't going to restore for you what you've already given up. And when you reach a level of maturity in which everybody's working for somebody who gives them dope, that's when we'll come back and restore the factories.